Welcome to Struck by Science, a podcast of the Polish Academy of Sciences Center in Vienna.
Hello, my name is Piotr Szlanta. I'm director of Scientific Center of the Polish Academy of Sciences in Vienna. Today, I would like to invite you for a talk with Professor Wanda Jarząbek, from a historian, also political scientist, professor at the Institute of Political Studies, Polish Academy of Sciences, Department of German Studies. From 2016 onwards, chair of Department of Eastern Studies. She graduated from the Institute of History at University of Warsaw, where she also defended her PhD thesis on Western Polish border in the policy of United States and Great Britain in years 1945-1958. She published, among other, a monograph on social engineering in Central and Southeast Europe in the 20th century, a book on Western German-Polish relation in 1968. Professor Jarząbek is currently conducting research on Polish foreign policy in the era of political, economic, and social transition in 1990s. She's also a specialist in Polish foreign policy. And I would like to talk with Professor Jarząbek about the origin of the Polish integration with European Union. What led me to address this topic. Firstly, this year marks the 20th anniversary of Poland's accession to the European Union. This had been the biggest wave on enlargement since we joined the EU in May 2004, together with as many as 9 other Eastern and Southern European countries. And there are still many European countries that wish to join this unique worldwide sphere of prosperity, peace, stability, and development. And secondly, Poland will take over the presidency of European Union the next 6 months. So before we start our discussion, I would like also add that it is the first in the series of podcast focus on various aspects and dimension of community building. So today we will discuss on European Union as community and this process of joining Poland. And before I ask a few questions, Wanda would like you maybe to add something about your currently research focus, what you're working at this moment.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for invitation and for giving me the opportunity to talk to you with you and to share with my new research. I would like to say that my basic research since many years is on international relations, different aspects of international relations, also Polish foreign policy. And right now I work on, as it was mentioned, on the Polish foreign policy in the period of transition. And this project is being realized with the framework of the National Security Center project from December 2022. So I would like to thank you also, the National Science Center, for supporting this very important research, because in Poland, this topic has not been, as for today, a subject of research made by historians as a whole. I mean, political scholars, economists, also many eyewitnesses were involved in sharing with their views, but historians were waiting for access to different sources, and right now we have this access, so we can study this topic.
Maybe it's understandable because of our methodology. We need to wait for, especially in diplomacy, history to access, as you mentioned, the archives to be open, and still, because me and you we are very well recollect all this problem, all this process from our personal experience, and so historian need to have some time distance from the occurrences which we are researching on. So at least it seems to me so. So coming to question, Wanda, what concept of security for Poland and the region emerged in Polish political debate after the fall of communism in 1989 and beginning of the pro-free market economy reforms?
First of all, I would like to mention that Poland did not enter the period after 1989 with ready-made or detailed concepts of its foreign policy. We should remember that changes ongoing in Poland were at the very beginning, and the Soviet bloc still existed. The Polish government was built from the members of former opposition, but also from the members of still existing Communist Party. And Warsaw Pact still existed, and Comecom also existed, and Soviet Union was one of the big powers entering talks on the changes of international relations. So first of all, the Polish government had to be very cautious. Of course, the members of opposition, they were not acting in a vacuum, because we can speak also about political thinking of the Polish opposition, also about their ideas concerning Poland in international relations. At the very beginning, I would like to underline it, that all the changes in Poland are not undermining the Soviet bloc collaboration, and that Poland is still ready to stay in Warsaw Pact. And so it was the very beginning. We should remember that the first visit of the new Prime Minister, Tadeusz Mazowiecki, it was Vatican and Moscow. So just to show that Moscow is still an important factor in international relations. And starting from the autumn, especially after the fall of Berlin Wall, Warsaw tried to ensure that the emerging new European order did not contain such elements that potentially could be dangerous to the newly regained Polish sovereignty. So I mean, the Poles try to secure a kind of room of maneuver to conduct the changes inside Poland and also to participate in building new system in Europe. And of course, we should remember that the fall of nations started just at the moment. So we can say that the history, the events started to accelerate it. Yes, the events accelerated, and so Poland had to adapt to the new situation, and so Poland had to adapt and had to observe what ideas emerge in international environment. And at the moment, it was not so clear, because we can say there were several ideas. One of the ideas was built by Gorbachev in 1988, and it was the idea of common European whole, which was mostly about European cooperation between different blocs in Europe. It was not very precise, but it was aimed at, in a sense, keeping alive the sphere of influence, even with a bigger room of maneuver. The second conception It was conception of transforming the Conference of Security and Collaboration in Europe in a kind of new platform of collaboration. For Poland, it was much better idea because in case of Gorbachev idea, the common European home, United States, Canada would be outside this structure. In case of a structure built on the Conference of Security and Collaboration in Europe, it would include United States and Canada, and it was very important for Poland. So it was also a kind of discussion that time what to do with the still existing military and political blocs. And also within NATO, there was such an idea. So some NATO countries were also not sure what to do with NATO. So the idea was to dismantle or to weaken, in a sense, the military structures and just to keep political structures still alive. I mean, NATO and Warsaw Pact would be transformed into political alliances more than military alliances. So we can say that the Polish government and the Polish foreign ministry, led that time by Minister Krzysztof Skubiszewski, they were observing the situation. They tried to ensure the Soviet Union that Poland is not going just to break ties to the former alliance. And on the other side, Poles tried to establish much more substantial contacts to the Western countries. In the spring of 1990, also to NATO. It was also the idea of the alliance, I mean, to start talks with the Soviet Union, with Poland, and with Hungary on the future of the collaboration in Central Europe. So the situation was developing, and the Poles try to find themselves in the new situation.
Okay, so when did this first period of constructing new Polish foreign policy and looking for a new place in this new political order ended? And you also mentioned about this strong focus on Soviet Union and Moscow in this first period. When it did started, when Poland also when the idea of that Poland could apply for your membership to European structure first arise in Polish political debate.
Very important point. It was the unification of Germany, of course, for, I mean, much more, I would say, brave foreign policy in case of Poland, because Polish borders were safe, and Poland started to feel much more convenient also in its relations to Western countries. When we are returning to European structures, we have to remember that they were different European structures, such as, for instance, Council of Europe. And there was, of course, European Economic Community, that time communities, that time changing to European communities. And it was the main, Poland tried to establish relations to European Economic Community, which next changed after some period of transformation into European Union, also during the communist times. And first relations were established in 1988, and next, at the really beginning of the activity of Mazowiecki government, a new agreement in September 1989 was signed with European communities, and diplomatic representation, the Polish diplomatic representation started to operate at the early 1990. In May 1990, Poland formally requested for association with the European communities, because the name at that time it was still European Community, not European Union. So in May 1999, it was a formal request. And bilateral agreement between Poland and the European Community was signed on 16 December 1991. And it was the same time as in case of the other two main Central European countries, I mean Hungary and Czechoslovakia, which this time was transforming into two countries. I mean, this time Confederation, next to countries. Well, I mean, the starting point, it is 1990, the request for association, and 1991, the Europe agreement between Poland and European Community.
You mentioned about other countries which at that point strive to be included into this Western sphere of political stability and economic development. Do you see any differences between the Polish or Czechoslovak or Hungarian strategy at this moment? We at that point the Visegrad group was established as far as I remember. So there was any cooperation between government in Warsaw, Prague, and Budapest, or more concurrence than cooperation.
Yes, it is a very interesting question. First of all, we should remember that not every country from the former Soviet bloc at the very beginning had even a chance to establish closer relations to European community. We are discussing the question of Central European countries, the three countries which were much more advanced in building democratic system. So it was very important. And I would say that in Poland, there was much more interest in closer collaboration with Prague and Budapest than in Prague and Budapest. So Poland initially expected closer collaboration, even in 1989, 1990. It was not the case of the Czech foreign minister and Czech government, and also not the case of Hungarian government. And it's really interesting. We can say that the countries, they were in a sense encouraged to start closer collaboration by the United States. Because in December 1990, President George Herbert Bush paid a visit to Prague, and in a kind of public speech, public announcement, he mentioned that no Central European country can count on special consideration in integration into the structures of Western Europe, and the cooperation of Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary will be a test of their political maturity and also of their capability to organize. So it is a diplomatic language, but it was a kind of push, okay, start to cooperate. And so the countries
Wanda,
started much.
could you please explain why political elites in Prague and Budapest were not willing to cooperate so strongly with Polish government at that point? Did they expect that because of the economic issue, it will be easier for them to be member of Western European landscape in economy and political without this huge Polish case, Poland, which went through very difficult political, maybe not political, but economical reforms?
In a sense, it is complicated. I mean, the countries, they had, every of the three, they had their interest. And it's true, their economic situation was much more better. But we should also remember that in Poland, in 1990, we have a government with the participation of former communists. Yes, it was in case of Hungary, 3 elections were announced. It was not the case of Poland. So even some of them, they perceive themselves as a little bit more advanced also in political transformation that time. The second question, it was the question of Czechoslovakia foreign policy and Foreign Minister Schwarzenberg, who was also interested in closer cooperation to some Western states, also Germany, and they thought just that Poland has much more problems with Germany, with the borderline, also the question with the East. So they, at certain point, they thought that maybe it would be better just to start individual talks with the West. But on the other side, also the Poles, they also start individual talks to the West. It's not just on one side they try to be advocate of a kind of cooperation in Central Europe, but on the other side they had their own talks with Western Europe. So I think every of these countries had in the back of their head, they had an idea that maybe we are a little bit in a better situation. The Poles as a kind of pioneers of solidarity, so the pioneer of democratic transition. The Czechs because of their good economic situation. The Hungarians because they announced the free elections earlier than any of these countries. So they tried to play their cards, and they understood suddenly that probably it would be not possible. So as you have mentioned, in 1999 they started their cooperation within the so-called Visegrad triangle, next Visegrad group, and they also prepared a kind of common declaration in 1992. The Visegrad Triangle, they addressed a memorandum to European communities in which they called on the community to to declare that they open talks to the three countries, and it was a common declaration. It was a declaration built from many points. So they appeal for faster opening markets for the goods from the Central European countries. They, also in case of agriculture, of steel products, of textiles from the three countries, they demanded also a kind of more advanced consultation on the enlargement. So they started in 1992, they started to speak with one voice on the question of talks with European community on the future membership of the three countries in the future European Union, because it is after the Maastricht announcement, the Maastricht Union. So it was announced that the European community is transforming into European Union.
Of course, there was some friction between East European countries, which you already mentioned, but not everyone in the Western Europe was supporter of this idea. There were also many fears about bringing this quite so poor and not democratic society, to the common European home, and this new European Union, which starts in November 1993. So, what methods, what arguments did Polish diplomacy use to win over Western European support for this enlargement idea? How we try to convince Western societies and Western politicians to allow us to join European Union?
Yes, you are right. The question was that the difference in economic development was huge that time. And all the countries, they were afraid of a kind of dumping from the Central European countries, especially in some areas. One of the French diplomats discussing the prosperous of UE enlargement said, and it is quoted in literature, that for a long time it is more politically difficult for France, for instance, to let Poland to sell tomatoes in France than for NATO to give Warsaw a pledge to fight and die to save it. So they were, of course, they were, in every of this country, especially in the case of France, the question of the domestic situation was very important. The question of local farmers was very important. And as we know, in fact, Poland entered NATO earlier than European Union. However, Poland expected it would be otherwise, that it would be much more difficult with NATO. But the economic situation in every of these countries was not so easy, and politicians, they have to act in a kind of democratic environment. They have to look for social support, and for farmers and also for people working in different areas, it was just a huge problem. So, what kind of arguments Poland used and the other countries use? First of all, they underline the situation. How it happened that Poland was cut off from the West. That it happened not due to the Polish interest, that Poland was forced to be a member of the Soviet bloc, and that the Poles were starving. They were fighting for independence, for democracy, for the whole period of communist rule in Poland, and that they tried just to free from the Yalta, on how it is said in the West, from the Crimea conference agreements, and that they were very brave, and that at certain point everyone in the Western world was in a sense fascinated with solidarity movement and with the peaceful revolution. So they use this type of arguments. The next argument, of course, the next group of arguments was connected with potential gains for the Western countries. It's not only just like the Poles, let's use this example with tomatoes, would like to sell their tomatoes or cherries in the West. In case Poland would be a member of European community, either would be associated with European communities, Poland would open its markets for the goods from the Western countries. So it will serve economic development in the West. It will help to keep the working places in the West. It will help the Western factories to develop because they start to produce much more goods. And so the economic arguments, these are not only for the pure or not very rich Central European countries, there are gains also for Western countries. They would profit from the enlargement. And the next group of arguments, they were security arguments and political arguments. Building a kind, enlargement and building one Europe will serve stabilization in Europe and stabilization of democracy in the Central European countries, because social problems would disappear in a sense, so less tensions in these countries would able to, would help to protect democratic transformation in these countries, that they are democracies, that they introduce a lot of changes into their domestic law. So right now they have free elections, there is no censorship, they have political systems similar to Western European system. And it was also a very important argument that they are, we should remember that in Soviet Union also many changes took place. And the Yanayev putsch, it was a kind of little shock for Western audience. So they were much more eager also to listen to some arguments connected with security. I mean, democratic countries in Central Europe would stabilize the eastern borderline of Europe. Also, in case both countries would be member of European Union, it means that a kind of political vacuum in center of Europe will disappear. And it was also a very important argument for some people.
Okay. But not, of course, the greatest part of the Polish public opinion supported the idea of integration of Poland with Western Europe, but not everyone. So, how strong were the political groups or Milo in Poland, which were not fans of integration? Which kind of argument they use in the public discussion just to oppose the idea of integration with Western countries, such as, for example, our enemy Germany?
Yes. I mean, first of all, vocabulary. So I would like to say that after 1989, in public uh, debate in Poland, it was usually spoken about Polish return to the West. On the West, there were two structures. I mean, security structures, NATO, and political and economic structures as European Community and next European Union and European Council and the other organizations. So it was rather about rejoining the West, than just entering European Union. And this is very interesting. We are rejoining the West. We are escaping from the East, where we were put on force. I even wrote an article published in International Relations, I mean, Relations Internationales in French, that for Poland, the main point that time, it was escape from the East, and to enter in the West. It was possible only in case Poland would be a member of Western European platforms of collaboration. And it was clear nearly for everyone. We should remember that even the Catholic Church, what was important for many Poles, even Pope John Paul II, he used to teach that that Poland is a part of Western Europe and Europe in general. The place of Polish state, Polish nation is in European Union. It was also the famous speech in the Polish parliament. And of course, there were some voices. We should remember that when we are going back also to the political thought of different opposition groups, some of them, they were speaking about a kind of particular situation of Poland, that Poland should stay in a sense in a gray zone. But it was not a kind of popular point of view, because for everyone it was clear that weak Poland would have a lot of problems with its independence, and also that Soviet Union, of course, disappeared, but Russia was, when we are looking back to the history, was always interested in a kind of overview over the situation, political situation in Poland. So it was important. And of course, there were some groups. There was also one political party which was against, and also during the referendum which took place in 2003, they tried to, during the campaign before the referendum, they tried to speak about the potential dangers coming from European Union dangers to Polish identity, and it was the League of Polish Families. But we have to say that the church, the Catholic Church, announced that they do not support, in a sense, this argumentation. That at that point, there was, it was made quite clear that there is no danger for Polish identity. I would like to say something what is important, that the Poles, in my opinion, when I'm going to the documents, I have such a feeling, as for now, that the Poles were less interested in the future of European Union, and it was clear that time which direction the European integration is going. I mean, that it's going to be a kind of closer collaboration, that a lot of policies that time attributed to national states would be given to European structures. But I think nobody discussed it that time. Nobody discussed it, or there were some small discussions, but nobody was really interested in it, because the general idea was a kind of not idea with clear contours. I mean, it was a kind of vague idea, yes, just a closer collaboration in European Union. And that time it was so important to become again a part of Western Europe that political parties, Polish politicians, Polish journalists, they emphasize the question of returning to West, first of all, not the future of European collaboration and European Union.
So during this discussion about pros and cons of Polish integration with Western Europe and with European Union after 1993 was a German factor. So I would like to ask you, as a specialist in Polish-German relation, really, could we treat this already united Germany, which already accepted a Polish border in November 1991, as the most prominent advocate of the Polish admission to the European Union? You mentioned about this tomato on the other side. So many Poles were afraid that German will come and buy out all of the Polish industry, not mention of land. So has the really German government lobbied for speeding up the process of Poland accession to the European structures, and which part in the discussion about the Polish participation in the European Union was played by these German issues, these fears?
Yes, I mean, these fears were very important at the very beginning. I mean, when the process of German unification started, it took the form of 4+2 conference, and Poland was excluded from the table, from the discussion on the table. And it was, we can say, the momentum when the Polish diplomacy really tried to convince the big three that Poland should be included into the talks. And in general, we should remember that not only Poland was afraid, because also Great Britain was afraid. The Prime Minister Thatcher also was a little bit afraid. The
François
French,
Mitterrand, he said
right,
that he loved so
yes.
Germany that it will be better to have two German states in place of one.
Yes. And what is really very interesting, the Polish Prime Minister Tadeusz Mazowiecki and the Polish that time President General Jaruzelski, they paid at the beginning of, in March 1990, a joint visit to Paris. There was a common speech with President Mitterrand, and France promised to support the Polish point of view that Poles should participate in these talks. What's happened, and the French side invited Poles for this part of the conference 4+2, in which the question of borderlines was discussed, and really it was consulted with the Poles. However, everything was not so easy. And so next we can say that even Chancellor Kohl, he announced after this visit in Paris, and that he had such a feeling like entente cordiale, new entente cordiale survived, and so on. But of course, it was not true. Poland was not a part of entente cordiale or little alliance. From all the groupings from pre-war period built by France, but still it was so perceived. And next the situation started to be a little bit normalized. And the question that Poland would be the Polish factories and Polish goods would be Polish immobilia would be bought by Germans. Of course, it was present, but it was, in a sense, a very clever policy of the Polish government, because that time, in fact, not only Germany, but also the other European countries were interested in the Polish economic transformation and in privatization, and they were interested in buying Polish factories. And in general, at the beginning, Germany were not this country who bought majority of the privatized factories. They were some other leaders from Austria, France, Italy, in case of medium-sized factories. So they were also other investors from the West. It was not like a visible German domination in case of privatization. And it was announced, these arguments were also used, these data were public, they were also published by the Polish Ministry of Economic Transformation and Privatization. So it was quite obvious to everyone. Even the Germans tried to use different arguments to convince the Polish side to allow them to buy more in Poland, but at certain point it was blocked. It was a kind of idea. It should be shared into different investors from different countries of different nationalities. And of course, that time Germany had also a lot of problems with domestic situation, integration of the two parts of Germany. So, the German politicians, they were also very cautious, we can say.
Could you please tell us which negotiation areas were the most challenging to reach agreement between Poland and European countries at that moment, the final phase of the Polish accession process?
Yes. So first of all, the Poles, they were obliged to build democratic institutions. What was more or less done at the beginning of the Polish transformation. Next, shortly before the negotiations, and in the European communities and European Union structures, a kind of screening of the Polish law started, Polish domestic law, and Poles had to adopt their legal system to the legal system of European Union. To accept the acquis communautaire. The whole European system, which was in a sense general. So in some areas detailed, in some areas more general. So first of all, the screening of the legal system in Poland. Next, negotiation in different fields. In it, agriculture, what was difficult, because it was the question of opening opening Western markets to Polish goods, and it was really very difficult. Second very difficult question, it was opening it was the steel industry, because Poland was a kind of strong country in case of production of steel, textiles. And so it was the question of quota of Polish products going to Western European markets. Very difficult was the question of the free flow of labor because and free flow of people in general. I mean, so it was agreed that Poles would be able to settle in European Union countries because it was very important for the European Union, I mean, to provide its citizens with the right to move. I mean, free movement, free flow of people, but it was the question of free flow of labor. And in case of some countries, as that time, let's say Great Britain, they open totally for Polish citizens, so the Poles could settle in Great Britain and they could work in Great Britain. In case of some other countries, and now we have Germany, they introduced a law, a ban for the free flow for Polish workers for 7 years. So, I mean, the German market was closed after Poland joined European Union for 7 years. The Poles were not able to settle and to go to German labor market. So it depended on individual countries. This time it was up to the national governments to precise what does it mean. I mean, to translate the European law to their legal systems. And when you mentioned that the German were perceived as advocate for Polish aspiration for European Union, at certain point, yes. But on the other side, the German government really protected its local system and from the a kind of concurrence from the workers from the new members of European Union for quite a long period of time, 7 years.
Yeah, I remember even this.
We got much for so long.
I remember even a joke that so after this mass immigration of the Poles to the Great Britain already in 2004, just after we joined European Union. So, do you think that countries currently applying for European Union, there are plenty of that, as we know, can benefit from Poland's experience in that field? There are any lesson which they can learn from this process, which we were talking about?
Well, I think right now the situation has changed so much that it's even really difficult to speak about it because also the acquis communautaire, I mean, the group of the European law bills and so on is bigger. And finally, the question of enlargement, it is a political decision. So every country has to introduce some changes. I mean, to introduce democratic system according to the standards of European Union. Should accept the question of free market economy. I mean, the regulations connected with free market economy. But finally, it's not only the question of economy. Let's take the example of Turkey. Turkey started as the talks on joining European communities earlier than Poland. It was quite advanced.
In 1960s, as far as I remember.
Yes, in talks, but the political obstacles are so big that it was not possible to finish this process. So it's difficult. I mean, situation is changing. The question is, it's not only the question of determination of individual countries, it's also the question of international situation, of international relations. And I would say that at the moment when Poland joined European Union or when Poland signed the the agreement on accession with European Union, that Poland took the momentum. It was the time when European Union was ready, in a sense, for enlargement. Even in every European country, also the dangers were perceived. The question of possible costs, yes, of a transfer of grants, European money to the new countries to stabilize them and to nivellate the differences in economic development. Of course, everyone, but there was a kind of enthusiasm, yes? Communists, the Iron Curtain was destroyed. Communism was finished. The Soviet Union disintegrated. There was maybe the history finished, as you remember the discussion, the end of history. So it was a different time. Now everyone is aware. The history has never finished. The history is going on. The same elements of the history and the rivalry, the rise of the countries who would like to dominate the other countries is just like it is a common problem, a current problem, a contemporary problem, just like it was in the past. And everyone starts to think much more about the question of being cautious, being aware of potential dangers. And so right now, the story is, of course, with Ukraine, but it's also the story with Balkan region, with West Balkan region. And it also takes a lot of time because we can say the history is here, and the rivalry is here.
Great powers
and
are here.
the great powers are here.
Mhm.
And also new great powers as
Yeah,
China.
I meant about
Much
China.
more a kind of globalization of also of politics right now. It is a global world with global dangers, with um, global aspects, not only the question of Europe. And that's the problem.
Okay, so and that will be the topic of our next podcast because we would like to talk about the contemporary challenges for European Union and the state of integration and many crises which European Union face. So thank you very much, Wanda, for the invitation. Thank you for your time. So that concludes our podcast. We would like to invite you to hear our series. The next topic will be about the contemporary stage of European integration, and we will see you soon. Bye.